Hello and welcome to the Week 2 devlog for my HTC Vive Archery game. This week I'll be telling you about some of the new things I've added, as well as start asking for some feedback for features that you guys want to see, or feedback from about features that I've implemented that you would like to see implemented in a different way, or additions made to them. The first thing you'll notice is that's different from last week is that we no longer have a target or a person here. We're left with a blank canvas. And the reason for that is that if we turn around, we have a way to select a range that we want to play on. So there are two ranges currently. This walkways range that has kind of little buildings where targets will pop up in the windows, and here obviously we get to see a very small representation of what we'll be playing on, and then a more traditional range that will have rows of targets at differing heights and distances, as well as some moving targets there. To select a range, all we have to do is hit the select button, and out popped our range. So to play the range, all we need to do is hit the start button. And I've changed the way that we get scored. Instead of having a running total of the last 15 arrows that we shoot like it was last week, we now have waves of targets that pop up and will show, and will, each wave has 4 targets, as well as the possibility of spawning a moving target, and I'll talk a little bit about that later in terms of the fairness of points. But let's just play a quick round here. So and each wave each wave has 4 seconds, 4 targets, and you have 6 seconds to shoot them. So you have a grace period of, I think, 1 arrow really to miss, and you'll be able to get all 4 of them. Me being the developer, it's a little bit hard to gauge difficulty, so I may need to increase that in the future, because as you can see, it's a pretty, the 6 seconds is a fairly short time limit. So I may increase that to 8 or even 10 seconds, depending on feedback when people start getting to play the game. But it's just a simple 10-wave system, and if you guys have played Hollow Point or any of the other kind of Space Pirate Trainer fast-moving VR games, if you're really going for a high score, you will get just as tired with this system, especially with this low time limit, as you can get with those other VR games. So that's kind of the way the system works. That's been the biggest change. Obviously, you can still see the scores here. The top score, I think, without the moving targets, since there's 4 worth 500 each and 10 waves, that's a 2,000 point, or 20,000 points possible. And each range has the same wave system. I will make a best score per range in the future. And so that's kind of been the biggest change. Obviously, making these little these ranges has taken a bit of time, but I have also done a fair bit of work on the actual bow mechanic. I've seen a lot of people ask for other developers of games to make sure to have left-handed mode. So I am happy to say that this also works the exact same way with your left hand. You can throw it up and shoot with my other hand just the same way. So I am making this bow ambidextrous for anybody who is left-handed or right-handed should be able to use the bow in the exact same way. The other thing that I had to do, which I wasn't expecting to do this early into development, is start doing optimization. So initially when I had all these targets pop up, at the very beginning all of them were up, and that made my system slow down a little bit, so I was starting to drop frames. And that's because obviously each one of these targets has a lot of sub pieces that break apart when you shoot a target. and I had to find a way to not display all those sub pieces unless the target was in the process of breaking, and that has fixed that issue. I just wasn't expecting to have to do optimizations like that already with such a minimal system in the game so far. My computer is running a GTX 980, and so I think in the near future, actually, I'll need someone who has a GTX 970, which is the minimum graphics card required to run VR, to help me out in testing, see what their frame rate is, because I do want as many people to be able to play the game as possible, and if I have to do a slight bit of downgrading the graphics, or even having what Hover Junkers does, where they have graphics options, I'd like to do that just so that more people are able to play the game when it is available. Other than that, this little system is just kind of a taste of what's to come. There's a lot of real estate around here for different buttons and things. I think that the system of waves and just 4 targets per wave is fairly easily understood, so I think it's a pretty good baseline for how scoring will happen, but I'm totally open to other ideas of how to do the scoring. I'd like to steer a little bit clear of kind of what the standard archery targeting is, where it's just a target that's really far away that you shoot at multiple times. Although for practice range, I can have kind of one of those target bags that you shoot into and doesn't explode. At the same time, for multiplayer, this is a really simple setup to just kind of pop in another player and everybody shoots at the same targets. But I have no idea what other types of game modes would be good. The one thing I would like to steer clear of is shooting at each other. In my limited experience of the VR games, in regards to multiplayer in particular, I've found that the multiplayer experiences where you're doing something kind of next to each other or with somebody are a bit more engaging than the ones that are purely combative. That's not to say games like Hover Junkers aren't fun. I have a lot of fun playing them, but I think I enjoy the experiences like the Cloudlands mini golf or the maze exploration in Alt Space, where you're doing things together. Even if you're competing, it's more of a side-by-side competition instead of a shoot at each other to kill each other competition. So one of the things I don't really want to do is have one player be on this side, the other player be on the other side, and shoot at each other and duck behind the cover, even though that's easily possible and not too difficult to make. It's just not really the experience I'm looking for in this type of game. The other thing that people have been asking about is multiple types of bows. I think it's possible. It's definitely something I can look into. The only thing is that this bow has not really been created generically. There's a lot of kind of hacked together systems to make this all work as effectively as it does in such a short period of time. That doesn't mean that it doesn't work because it's hacked together. It just means that it's not very extensible for additional types of bows. I'm sure I could make a short bow or even a compound bow work pretty well without too much effort, but things like crossbows they would kind of require an entirely different setup. So while they may come in the future, it's definitely kind of secondary to a lot of the other things that I'll be working on. One of the things that I can do, though, is make different types of arrows. I think that kind of specialty arrows might be really fun, a very fun thing to do, where you have a limited number of specialty arrows that you get to use. Normally you would be pulling them out of your quiver, but if you want to use kind of like a scatter shot type arrow or a buckshot arrow, you can grab, maybe you get 3 per round that you play, and you can grab one off and shoot that instead. Those aren't too difficult because the actual arrow is built fairly generically and won't be too hard to extend to other types. So if anybody has interesting ideas on different types of arrows to use for this type of target practice type thing, I'm also very open to that. And then obviously additional ranges. I have these two ranges that I think work pretty nicely to show the different types of experiences you can get, where this one is a much more standard range and the other one is kind of more not industrial, but more old-timey, where it's kind of almost like a village setup, where targets are in the windows. And so if people have image references or places to look for really cool shooting ranges, especially shooting ranges built specifically for bow and arrow, I'm very interested in seeing those, because these were actually a lot of fun to make. They took a bit of time, but I think that adding a lot more of these would be really great for just adding some great content to play against. And obviously, right now I have kind of this global high score, but in the future, your top score will be tied to the range that you play. So yeah, I think that's basically it for this week. I'm really excited to keep working on this and show you guys what progress I've made, and I can't wait to hear back from you on what you guys are looking forward to. Thanks.